Hi, Karen here again, and we're working on part 8 of the Red Tree, an acrylic painting teaching video. We're coming pretty close to the end of this little painting, and I'm continuing to work on the weeds and grasses and bushes that are along the side of the road, and using this technique where I take a rigger brush or a liner brush and use it very loosely, holding it very loosely in my fingertips to add a little bit of chaos and interest and random things going on along the sides. I move back and forth from a light color to a dark color and just have fun playing. I'm also going to use this lighter color along the road to add some highlights to the road. And you can see I'm dragging my brush sideways very lightly along the road. Then I will come back in with my round brush and soften a few of those edges there. Coming up along the bottom, I like to leave the top edges the way the brush randomly made marks on the canvas, and then soften out the bottom edge of the brush stroke. Have it blend into the road there. Now I'm using my round brush on the side to make some highlights along the road as well. Just a sense of layer on layer, adding interest and something going on, something different going on there. It's funny how hard it is to get a sense of randomness and have it look random, if that makes any sense. This light color I'm using is a blend of Quin Gold, white, a little bit of blue, a little bit of cadmium red. It's sort of a grayed down light color. Adding the brush in the side. And again, I like to always not just put a color in one area of your canvas, but to move back and forth in the canvas and add a little bit of touches of that color in other places on the canvas to keep a feeling of continuity and integrate the different areas of the canvas. This was this little area on the right-hand side where we were going to add more weight than was actually in the reference photo, and by that I mean more interest and something to draw the eye. I'm using this reddish color that's made from Cad Red, Alizarin Crimson, a little Quin Gold, the same colors that I used in the tree, and I'm adding a little bit of that over there too. Again, there wasn't very much of this in the reference photo, but I like to add a little bit to blend the areas of the canvas together. Coming back with some green. This is a pretty chromatic green made with my two blues, some cad yellow, and some Quin Gold. Rolling that brush, creating the grasses and the leaves. Getting ready pretty quick here to add that little row of daisies that came down, wild little daisy type weeds that came down the middle of the road. So I'm setting up a background for that. And with daisies, what I tend to do is use a bluish gray color for the shadow side of the flowers, and then come back with some lighter colors over the top. But right now I'm just using different colors of greens to add layers of green to the grasses. Real light strokes, flicking my brush upwards and then downwards also into the tops of those lights that I put in there. Adding some of that darker color at the base of those so they're grounded. Here's showing the shadows at the base of those grasses. And now I'm going to start working on that center area of the road. Again with the daisies, adding those. I ran out of white. I was wondering what I was doing there. Got to get some fresh white. White especially tends to get muddy as you go through the painting process. And to make these little white daisies, I got to make sure I've got a little bit of pure white to use to mix with. Okay, some titanium white, some ultramarine blue. And this is putting in the shadow. It's trial and error and experience over time to figure out how much paint you need on your brush. Too much and it'll just glob up and cover up all the underlayers you've done, and too little and you won't get a nice clean brush stroke. So here, just using the side of my brush, the tip of my brush, and dabbing in a sense of those little daisies running up the middle of the road. And again, this is the shadow color I'm doing right now. Just ultramarine blue and white. Now I'm coming in with taking some white with a tiny bit of cadmium yellow. And you notice how I tapped some of it off my brush so that I didn't get too much yellow. But I want this to be a warm, bright color where the daisies are in the sunlight. Some of these little areas I'll tap in the white, the yellow white, and then I'll blend them together a little bit, because you don't want to get a whole bunch of just individual equal sized dots, because that won't look like flowers. You want to try to vary the size, blend some groups of them together. Now I rinsed out my brush, dried it off, and I'm coming in and blending some of those bottoms, the bottom sides. Again, leaving the top of some of them where the brush stroke alone, so you get a little bit of a hard edge of the brush stroke, and then blending out the bottom. Back in with some of my shadow color, the ultramarine blue and white, and putting some of the shadow back in. It's always this process of back and forth, shadow to light. And here I'm going back into some of my green, adding a little more yellow and white to it to make it a lighter green. And then some blue to dull it down again. And here I want to just pull that foliage back in underneath the daisies. Some lighter foliage. Remember, I'd put in a pretty dark green to start with. And so here I just want to put a slightly lighter green in. You know, a little daisy foliage always has a sort of a bluer tinge to it. Adding a little more ultramarine blue and some Alizarin Crimson to get a shadow color there. A little more blue. And get some shadows underneath those, ground those daisies into the roadway. Breaking in that up a little bit where the white is. Take a look at it. It'd be real easy with this these white daisies to get them to be very obvious, and I don't want to do that. Remember, our focal point is still the red tree. One thing with foliage is, see there, I got too much of that paint on my brush, and so I globbed it in and it covered up a lot of my underwork there, so I'm coming back with a clean brush to soften that out again. But what I'm trying to do here is, you'll notice in foliage you'll get little sparkles, wherever you have a reflective surface in the landscape, it's going to reflect the blue sky. So even though you have a green bush or a grayish tan roadway, wherever it's flattest, you're going to get some blue reflections as long as it's got a clear blue sky. So I'm putting in that blue on the flat surfaces to show the reflection of the sky. Making myself a little more blue with the ultramarine and white. And adding some of it to the foliage and the grasses. Adding that little bit of blue into the greens and the browns of the foliage always sparkles it up a little bit, and also blends your painting together. Adding it on the roadway. Getting pretty close to the finishing touches on this. In our last segment, I'll start here pretty quick. We're going to start working on the finishing shaping of our red tree, which is our focal point. So going into basically finding that sky color again, which is a little cooler blue. It's got some of the phthalo blue and white that I'm mixing up now. Now what I'm going to do is start putting in what we call sky holes. So that tree right now is just looking like a big solid mass, and I want it to be more feathery than that and show bits of the sky through. One thing to think about when you're making sky holes is that you're gonna use your sky color, but it's gonna be slightly darker. For some reason, when you put that color in amongst the darker foliage like that, if you use the exact same color, it looks too light and too white. So mix up your color, but mix it a little bit darker than the actual sky color you used. And again, this will be a little bit of a back and forth process. I'm tapping in some sky holes, and then I'll come back and put a little bit more tree back on top of the sky holes. That's called painting the negative spaces when you do this. So we have one more part to this section, to this little painting, and then we'll be finished, and I hope you'll join me for that.